Your story, our station.
If you've ever felt trapped in that endless top 40 loop, you know the feeling. Same songs, same sounds, same safe choices. Like the world hit repeat and lost the button to try something new. Today, I want to introduce you to a crew that's built to do the exact opposite. Change the station entirely. Bullet End Flight is based right in the heart of the 505, Albuquerque, where the green chili runs hot and the creative energy somehow runs even hotter. And when I say Bullet End Flight, I'm not talking about one single project or one single vibe. Think of it more like a parent company to a whole family of artistic misfits. People who don't fit neatly into the usual boxes, and honestly, don't want to. At the center of everything is a mission that's pretty simple to say, but not always easy to pull off. Elevate the voices that usually get talked over. The artists who get labeled too niche, or too different, or that weird one, too Albuquerque. Whatever that's supposed to mean. If you've ever heard something like that about your work, this is your invitation to pull up a chair. Because that's not a deal breaker here. That's the whole point. Bullet End Flight is built around inclusivity, creative community building, and giving underrepresented artists the megaphone they deserve. Not as a trend, not as a marketing angle, but as the core identity. It's a response to a creative world that can feel gated, filtered, and overly polished, where the most interesting voices get told to tone it down so they can be easier to sell. And here's where it gets fun. Bullet End Flight doesn't believe in staying in one lane. Because why would you? Why drive a sedan when you could take a spaceship? The whole approach is more like, what does human expression look like across every format? And then going after all of it. Let's start with music, because that's a major part of the DNA. The mindset here isn't pick a genre and stay in it. It's more like, what's the vibe, and does it hit? That can mean the spiritual charge of gospel, the late-night pulse of house music, the smooth storytelling and emotion of R&B, or even that classic country charm where life falls apart but somehow the drink is still cold. It's not about fitting into a category. It's about making something that feels alive. But it doesn't stop at music. There's a strong dedication to the spoken word too. Podcasts that get into the real stuff, not just surface-level chatter, and poetry that doesn't play nice. The kind that lands heavy, the kind that says what people avoid saying, the kind that reminds you words can still be dangerous in the best way. Then there's film and TV writing. Getting into scripts that actually have a heartbeat. Not another recycled reboot of a reboot. Not something designed by committee to offend the fewest people possible. The focus is on stories with soul. Stories with perspective. Stories that sound like they came from real lives, in real places, with real edges. And of course, the stage. Because there is nothing like live performance. It's unpredictable, it's electric, and yeah, anything can happen. And usually does. The stage is where art stops being an idea and becomes a moment, right in front of people who can feel it in real time. So why would an artist want to plug into something like this? Because being a starving artist has been romanticized for way too long, and it doesn't need to be the default. And being a lonely artist, trying to build everything by yourself, with no village, no network, no support, That's even worse. Bullet and Flight is about building that village on purpose. The goal is to take the talent that's been brewing in the Southwest, often overlooked, often underestimated, and project it outward. Not in a please notice us kind of way, but in a we're already here, and we're bringing the whole sound with us kind of way. Bullet and Flight positions itself as a launch pad, a safety net, and the hype you didn't realize you were missing. And let's be honest, a lot of people are tired of gatekeepers. Tired of needing permission. Tired of feeling like they have to sand down everything interesting about their work to be taken seriously. If that's you, this is a space that's built for finding your tribe. People who want loud, weird, real art, and who aren't afraid to make it together. If you want to get in the mix, deombase is https://justdominic. And if you want the visuals, you can find the YouTube channel at @justdominic.music. Bullet and Flight Music, LLC is the company behind it all. And the invitation is open. Check out what's being built, listen to what's coming out, and if you're ready to change the station, this is a good place to start.
Waiting for you. Christ Followers Network on Bullet and Flight Radio. Oh, on Bullet and Flight Radio.
Welcome back to Bullet and Flight Radio, where it's your story, our station. Today we're stepping into a topic that touches every continent, every city, every neighborhood, and at some point, almost every household. The episode is called Feast, Famine, and Finance, Decoding Global Hunger Through Radical Economics and Ancient Wisdom. Because we're living inside a contradiction that should be impossible. On paper, the planet is producing enough food to feed around 10 billion people. And yet hunger is rising. Food banks in the United States are stretched thin, and in parts of the global south, people are facing acute starvation. So the question isn't, can we grow enough? The more honest question is, why are people going without when the shelves are full somewhere else?
And that's where we have to reframe the whole crisis. If we treat hunger like it's mostly an agricultural problem, we'll keep looking for fixes that never reach the root. What we're dealing with is structural, and in a deeper sense, spiritual too. It's about how we distribute, how we price, how we profit, and what kind of society we've decided to be when it comes to something as basic as eating. Let's start with the everyday math, just to ground this in real life. In the United States, feeding one adult isn't a vague concept. It has a monthly price tag. For the average adult, the cost to eat for a month often falls somewhere between about $346 and $543. That's roughly $80 to $125 a week, and it shifts a lot depending on what you eat, where you live, and how much time you have to cook.
Now, if someone tries to follow the USDA Thrifty plan, which is basically the bare minimum blueprint for nutrition, the numbers come down to around $247 to $309 a month. But here's the catch that doesn't show up well in spreadsheets. That plan assumes you have the time, the energy, the kitchen tools, and the stable living situation to cook nearly everything from scratch, avoid waste, and shop strategically. In other words, it assumes a level of stability that many struggling people simply don't have. And if you zoom out from the individual to the family, the story gets heavier. A household of 4, say 2 adults and 2 kids, on the USDA's moderate cost plan, is looking at around $1,347 a month just for food. That's before we even talk about rent, healthcare, childcare, transportation, or debt payments. So already, even in a wealthy country, you can feel the squeeze. But raw dollar amounts don't tell the real story. Because hunger isn't just about prices. It's about income. It's about power. It's about what share of your life is consumed by the question, can we eat this week?
So let's talk about the global divide by looking at food as a percentage of income. In high-income countries like the United States and the UK, Food often takes up a smaller slice of the overall budget compared to housing or medical costs. In the U.S., the average household spends around 9.7% of disposable income on groceries. But that national average can be a kind of mirage. Because when you look at the poorest households, the percentage explodes. The lowest income quintile in the United States spends something like 33% of their before-tax income on food. 1/3 of your money just to eat. That's not a lifestyle choice. That's a structural trap.
And outside what some people call the empire, the numbers get even more intense. In much of the developing world, food isn't a smaller line item you can adjust. It's the main cost of living. In many emerging economies, families routinely spend 40% to more than 50% of their entire income on food. Think about what that means. When half your income goes to eating, one shock in the system, one medical bill, one bad harvest, one job loss, one currency fluctuation, and suddenly you're not cutting back. You're falling off a cliff.
So when we ask, why are people starving during a time of abundance, we have to stop pretending it's a mystery and start following the money. This is where radical economists like Richard D. Wolff and Michael Hudson give us a sharper lens, because they don't treat hunger as an accident. They point to mechanisms. They describe incentives. They name the systems that manufacture scarcity in the middle of plenty. Richard D. Wolff's critique is direct. In our economic model, food is not protected as a human right. It's treated as a commodity. And commodities don't exist to nourish people. They exist to generate returns. That single framing changes everything. Because when supply chains tighten, or when war and climate pressure make markets jittery, food turns into something that can be bought, stored, traded, and even gambled on. It becomes an asset class. And if it becomes an asset class, then the people who suffer first are the people with the least cash and the least leverage.
Wolff also points to the bigger historical shift happening in the background, what he might call the decline of the old unipolar Western order. When an empire starts losing its grip, it often tries to stabilize its position by squeezing the people beneath it. That pressure can land on workers at home and on poorer nations abroad. The result is a kind of engineered shortage. Not because food doesn't exist, but because it becomes unreachable. It's there, but it's priced out of the hands that need it most. Michael Hudson pushes into another layer, the rentier economy, where wealth grows not mainly through producing things, but through owning things and extracting payments. Hudson talks about how developing nations have often been locked into debt relationships with international financial institutions like the IMF. And once you're trapped in that cycle, the demands aren't just pay us back. The demands often reshape your whole country.
To service the debt, nations can be pressured into selling off public land, privatizing essential resources like water, and reorganizing agriculture away from feeding their own people and toward exporting cash crops for external markets. That's not just policy. That's a form of financial imperialism. The country becomes an engine designed to generate tribute. Value flows outward, and the people left behind experience what looks like hunger, but is really structural starvation. Not a lack of food on earth, but a system that redirects the benefits of land and labor away from the local population. So that's the structural side. But now I want to shift, because if economics explains the machinery, it doesn't always heal the soul. And hunger is not only an external condition. Hunger is also an experience, a sensation, a spiritual wound, and sometimes, in sacred traditions, a deliberate practice. When global supply chains tighten, the resulting price hike is an annoyance for the wealthiest nations, but it is a catastrophic, systemic shock for the rest of the world. This is precisely why the localized, decentralized food sovereignty movements taking root today are not just a lifestyle choice, they are a critical survival strategy. Here we step into Ethiopian and esoteric wisdoms, and particularly the spiritual technology of fasting. Because if empire imposes involuntary hunger, spiritual tradition sometimes chooses voluntary hunger for transformation. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, fasting isn't a minor seasonal habit. It's one of the most rigorous fasting cultures on the planet, with devoted believers fasting up to roughly 250 days a year.
Now, it's important to say, in the Ethiopian tradition, fasting is not just, don't eat this, avoid that. It's not diet culture. It's not a wellness trend. It's deeply communal, and it's tied to justice. Abstaining from animal products and eating later in the day becomes a practice of disciplining the ego and quieting the demands of the body. But it also has a social purpose. What you don't consume becomes something you're meant to give. Resources saved through restraint are meant to become alms for the poor. In that sense, fasting becomes a mechanism for redistribution and a school for empathy. Let not your spirit be grieved on account of the times, for the Holy and Great One has appointed days for all things. And the righteous one shall arise from sleep, shall arise and walk in the path of righteousness, and all his path and guide shall be in eternal goodness and grace.
1 Enoch 92:2-3. This passage is a direct balm for times of massive global upheaval. It is a reminder that structural collapse and difficult times are part of a larger cosmic cycle. The text urges the spiritual seeker not to fall into despair, because the collapse of the old era is simply making way for a baseline of eternal goodness. And that idea matters in a world where the comfortable can forget what emptiness feels like. Voluntary fasting, practiced with integrity, can retrain attention. It can remind a person that hunger is not theoretical. It's a daily reality for millions. The fast makes that reality harder to ignore, and if it's paired with generosity, it turns private spirituality into public solidarity.
From a broader esoteric perspective, the physical and the spiritual aren't separate worlds. They're interwoven. Hunger becomes an encounter with the void, with emptiness, with the stripping away of material illusion. And esoteric teachings often speak in cycles, in ages, in transitions where old structures begin to fail and lose their energy. In that frame, you could say that societies also go through a kind of fasting. Systems that once looked permanent start to weaken. The old arrangement gets starved of its power so that something new can be born. And that brings us to the big question: what does this global shift mean for the so-called old empire? And what does it mean for marginalized communities?
It's really a story with two different futures moving at once. For the old empire, the outlook looks like contraction. As more of the world organizes toward multipolar power, as nations and blocs like the BRICS countries assert alternatives, the West can't rely as easily on what amounts to an extractive free lunch, where costs are pushed outward and benefits flow inward. The inflation, the turmoil, the sense of instability many people feel is not random. It can be understood as the stress of an empire that's realizing it can't offshore its pain the way it used to.
But for marginalized communities, the breakdown of centralized food monopolies and brittle global supply chains can open a door, even if it opens through crisis. Because when long supply chains falter, survival pushes people toward localization. And localization, in the right hands, can become liberation.
We're already seeing what looks like a quiet renaissance, communities reclaiming food sovereignty. That means the right of people to healthy, culturally meaningful food produced with ecological wisdom and sustainable methods. It's not just more access. It's control. It's the ability to decide what gets grown, who it feeds, and who profits from it.
And as rentier structures crack, space can open for things like agroecology, worker-owned co-ops, neighborhood mutual aid, and local networks that don't wait for permission from distant institutions. In a strange way, people who have been excluded from the empire's prosperity can be uniquely prepared for this moment, because surviving on the margins often requires skills the center never learns: improvisation, community reliance, sharing, and resilience. The persistent struggle with inflation boils down to a brutal combination of compounding math, trailing wages, and severe spikes in basic, unavoidable essentials. Even when headlines report that inflation is stabilizing, the reality on the ground feels entirely different. A common point of confusion is hearing that inflation has slowed down, while watching grocery receipts and utility bills remain astronomically high.
When the inflation rate drops from 8% to 4%, it does not mean prices are dropping. It simply means they are rising at a slower pace. The massive price hikes from the last several years are permanently baked into the economic baseline. Families aren't just fighting today's inflation, they are carrying the cumulative weight of years of consecutive hikes.
For a brief moment during the post-pandemic recovery, wages actually beat inflation for the lowest earning tier of workers. That trend has reversed. The gap, nominal wage growth, the literal dollar amount on a paycheck, has slowed to roughly 3.5% to 3.7%. The reality, meanwhile, the trailing 12-month Consumer Price Index (CPI) has climbed back over 4.2%, driven by new economic pressures, supply disruptions, and the lagging effects of sweeping tariffs.
When prices rise faster than paychecks, real wages shrink. Households lose purchasing power month after month, effectively taking a pay cut just for doing the same job. Families can choose to skip a vacation, delay buying a new car, or cut back on dining out. But they cannot opt out of rent, electricity, or healthcare. The current wave of inflation is disproportionately hitting the exact categories people need to survive. The energy squeeze, geopolitical tensions have pushed gasoline prices significantly higher. Simultaneously, residential electricity rates are climbing at double the rate of overall inflation, fueled by aging grid infrastructure, rebuilding after extreme weather, and the immense power demands of booming AI data centers. The insurance tax, car and home insurance premiums have faced aggressive rate hikes across the country, with some disaster-prone states seeing homeowners' insurance premiums jump by more than 20% as major insurers pull out of markets. Healthcare costs, health insurance premiums are taking a major bite out of workers' paychecks, with marketplace plans seeing double-digit average spikes following the expiration of pandemic-era federal tax credits.
During the early 2020s, many families managed to build a temporary cash buffer due to student loan pauses, stimulus programs, or reduced spending. That safety net is entirely gone. The national personal savings rate has plummeted to 3%, hovering near a 4-year low. Without a savings cushion, there is no shock absorber. Every single grocery price adjustment or unexpected car repair forces immediate, stressful trade-offs. Families are not struggling because they are managing their money poorly. They are struggling because the baseline math of survival has outpaced the baseline math of working-class income.
Now, if you're a church leader, a spiritual leader, especially someone trying to guide people through uncertainty, the question becomes practical. Not is change coming, but how do we prepare? And preparation has to combine material action with spiritual grounding. You need both, because without material strategy you get empty inspiration, and without spiritual grounding you get burnout and fear.
First, there's a shift from charity to prophetic critique. Food banks matter. Pantries matter. Emergency feeding is necessary. But we have to be honest, charity alone does not confront the system that creates the emergency. Leaders need to speak clearly about debt, commodification, and extracted wealth. They need the courage to sound like the prophets, calling out systems that treat human need as a marketplace. The language may be modern, but the moral issue is ancient, people being crushed so someone else can profit. Second, there's the reclaiming of fasting, not as performance or self-improvement, but as spiritual technology. Fasting can teach detachment in a time when people are addicted to consumption, and it can build inner resilience. But it should also be tied to outward action. Resources saved get redirected into mutual aid, into community support, into real redistribution. Fasting becomes a way to find the divine in the void, and at the same time, it becomes a pathway to solidarity with those who live that void daily, not by choice. Third, we build parallel infrastructure. And this is where it gets beautifully tangible. Church lawns can become community gardens. Congregations can partner with local farmers instead of only relying on distant distributors. Communities can start seed libraries, learn preservation skills, host bulk buying cooperatives, and treat the spiritual center as a center for resilience, not just a place for gatherings. The goal is not isolation. The goal is local strength that can withstand shocks.
Thank you for listening to Bullet in Flight Radio, your story, our station. So where does all of this leave us, emotionally and spiritually, in a world that feels like it's permanently changing?
It starts with accepting a hard truth. The old normal isn't coming back. And more than that, the old normal was never normal for millions of people. For a huge portion of humanity, normal has meant food insecurity, exploitation, and periodic famine conditions. So bracing for impact can't mean trying to preserve an order that was already failing the majority. It has to mean choosing creation over preservation.
We need the economic sobriety of thinkers like Wolff and Hudson to name what is collapsing and why. And we need the ancient, esoteric faith that understands collapse not only as tragedy, but as a threshold. In many spiritual traditions, emptiness isn't the end. It's the beginning of purification. It's the space where a new thing can be formed.
If we ground ourselves locally, practice radical solidarity, and honor the spiritual wisdom of voluntary simplicity, we can move through what's coming with less panic and more purpose. The empire may be starving, yes. But that doesn't have to mean we all starve with it. It can also mean we stop feeding the systems that devour life, and we start feeding the world that wants to be born.
Well, the times they are a-changing fast. Some old truths just built to last. We're the Christ following network on Bullet and Flight Radio. Yeah, the Christ following network on Bullet and Flight Radio. Christ following network on Bullet and Flight Radio.
Bullet and Flight, fly. Bullet and Flight, fly. Bullet and Flight, Bullet and Flight, Bullet and Flight, fly. Bullet and Flight, fly. Fly.